Well, good morning. Let me extend my welcome to worship this morning. My name is Adam Hildebrand, and I get to be one of the pastors here at LVfirst. Such a joy to be with all of you in worship this morning, whether you're joining us here in person or you're joining us online. We're just excited to have a time together. If you're new here this morning, we are glad that you're here, and we do want to connect with you. We'd love to get to know you a little bit, hear a little bit of your story, and have an opportunity to share some of ours. Last week, we kicked off this series we're calling Game Plan because Jesus has this very clear plan for what he wants our lives to look like, for who he wants us to be, for how he wants us to play the game of life. He shows up to a group of disciples one day on a seashore, and he says, hey, come close to me, follow me, and I'll make you fish for people. It's this clear game plan that has 4 different parts, and we've started talking about them. Last week, we talked about this idea that Jesus invites all of us to come close to him. Doesn't matter who we are, doesn't matter what we've done, doesn't matter where we've been. Jesus says, just take one step towards me. Just get a little bit closer. Just spend a little bit of time with me. Just find out a little bit more about me. Just see who I am. Just take one step. Today, I want to spend a little time talking about, I think, what is the most difficult step in the path of faith, in this game plan that Jesus invites us to. I want to do that by telling you this story. I've enjoyed kind of seeing some preseason football. I've enjoyed seeing some training. I've enjoyed getting on the internet and following my alma mater, the Gardner-Webb University, the greatest small college in Western North Carolina, of which there are like 86 million small colleges in Western North Carolina. But Gardner-Webb University, I've enjoyed watching some of my friends who are still there, who are a part of the coaching staff, coaching the soccer team, getting them into preseason workouts. And it made me think this last week, it made me think back to this day. And like I can remember it so clearly. As an 18-year-old kid, having just graduated high school and signed to go and play soccer at Gardner-Webb, I remember going out to the mailbox one day, and like the mailbox, like actual physical mail. You guys know about that? Not email, like a real mail, like just the flag and everything. And I pulled this packet out from the school, and it come from my coach, and it said athletic department, and I was like, man, I love this. This is so cool. It had a shirt in it, and then it had this letter from coach, and it had this packet, the spiral bound packet, and the letter from coach talked about preparing for what we were going to go through, preparing for the season. He talked about kind of our game plan, what we were going to do, Gardner-Webb running Bulldogs, like that was our thing, and we were going to outrun, outlast, outgrit every other team. Now, when he said we were going to be the running Bulldogs, he wasn't kidding. Like that was like going to be our thing. We were going to run a whole lot. And so in the packet was included this spiral-bound workout system for the summer. So it had like all the workouts for the summer, like every day broken down. This is what you need to do this day. This is what you need to do this day. This is what you need to do this day. And in the packet, I'll never forget this line that was in the packet, that was in the letter from Coach. It said, if you follow this workout plan, you'll be ready for preseason. And I'll never forget that phrase, because I didn't do that, right? I did anything but that, right? So I got this packet. It's got day by day broken down. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to get ready. This is how, if you follow these instructions, you'll be ready to fulfill our game plan. You'll be ready to do this. All you got to do is follow this simple packet of different workouts through the summer. But I'm an 18-year-old kid, right? Like, I know everything. I just graduated from high school. I've got all the knowledge that you could possibly have in the world. I was a pretty good high school soccer player, and so I knew how to train. I didn't need a whole packet of workouts to tell me how to train, to tell me how to get ready. Plus, I had a lot of plans that summer, right? I had things I needed to do. I had places I needed to go. I had friends I needed to see. I needed to go to the beach a whole lot. And so I wasn't going to follow this packet. I was going to do my own thing. I was going to do it my own way. The only problem was I was playing by my own game plan, and it was all wrong. I showed up completely unprepared. I had a terrible experience that first year. I almost quit. And I'd love to tell you that I learned my lesson. I really would. I'd love to tell you that I learned my lesson. But I, like so many of us, struggle to follow directions. I struggle to follow directions. I don't want anybody else telling me how to do things. I just don't. I don't like it. I don't deal with it well. I mean, like, to the point that, you go buy something from IKEA and you get this, like, random guy who tells you how to build this thing. I don't need those instructions. I can figure this out. And so there are a number of bookshelves in our house that hold books, kind of. And if you shake them, don't shake them. If you come to my house, don't shake the bookshelves. That's all I'm saying. Is I didn't follow directions. It may not be as tight as it's supposed to be. It may not be perfectly done. And there are lots and lots of things in our house and in my wife Michelle and I's time married where she's like, babe, will you just follow the directions? I'm like, I don't need the directions. I got this. I do not got this. Okay, like I don't got this. Like there's lots of holes in walls. There are different things that aren't hung correctly. There, things have fallen down. It's just not. It's not a good situation. And I wish it just stopped there. But like I can't even follow the directions on the side of the like pancake mix, right? I'm like I don't need those directions. I'll just figure it out. I'll eyeball it, right? And so sometimes the pancakes are like wafer thin, sometimes the pancakes are really thick, sometimes I just refuse to follow the actual instructions and measure anything. Like I can't follow directions very well, or I choose not to follow directions very well. We see this in all sorts of places in our lives. If we're willing to be honest about it, there's times that all of us have struggled, that all of us have wrestled with this idea that I don't need anybody else to tell me how to live. I don't need anybody else. I don't need to follow the directions. I don't need to do what I'm told. I've got this. I've got it all figured out. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I don't need anyone to tell me how to do things. But when Jesus shows up in the scriptures and when we read about Jesus coming to earth and walking with people and inviting them to be a part of something, Jesus invites them into a specific way of life. This life in the kingdom of God. He gives us a specific game plan. We talked about it. Come close to me, follow me, and I'll make you fishers of people. We talked about it in this way last week. We said what Jesus really asks us to do is simple. It's just to take a step, to open our hands, to know his words, and to do his work. That's what that call really invites us to. That's the game plan. That's what Jesus asks all of us to do. If you want to follow Jesus in the right way, if you want to be a disciple, if you want to learn more about life well lived, it's that simple. Take a step, open your hands, know God's word, do God's work. Now, the opening the hands thing just means following Jesus. It just means that we're invited to follow after Jesus, to work this process that Jesus invites all us to. But we really prefer shortcuts. That's part of my problem with the directions is I want to get to the end. I want the outcome. I want it done. I want it now. That's why we love get-rich-quick schemes, and we love some of these diet fads, and we love all sorts of different things that feel like they get us to the end goal without actually working through the difficulty of the process. We want to be ready for preseason without actually doing the work during the summer. But I love what Brooke Cups, who's a basketball coach out of Texas, says in his great little book called Surrender the Outcome. He uses this phrase with his players. He says, trust the process, surrender the outcomes. Trust the process, surrender the outcomes. And all of us are like, I don't like surrendering anything. Let alone the outcomes. I really like the outcomes. The outcomes is that's what I want. So I want to do everything I can to control the outcomes. But Jesus invites us into this simple process of living a life to the fullest. And the process is simple. Jesus just says, follow me. Come and follow me. Again, we don't do this easily. We struggle with this. We want to manipulate the outcomes. We want to get to the end. We want to control everything. And oftentimes what we realize is we have very little control. Our scripture this morning looks at somebody's life who, much like ours, somebody who wanted to control the outcomes. They wanted to figure out a way to get to where they wanted to go and get all of the things that they thought that they needed in this world in a way that worked best for them, that worked quickest, that was the easiest, that didn't work through the process but got straight to the outcomes that they thought they needed. But this person, like so many of us, once they got all that they wanted, realized that it wasn't actually enough. The Gospel of Matthew tells the story of Matthew. Now, Matthew was a tax collector. Let me give you a little bit of background on this. I know we've talked about this before, but tax collectors were not exactly popular folks in the first century. Tax collectors, especially in the Jewish world, were not popular folks in the first century. When Jesus comes along and encounters Matthew for the first time, Matthew is sitting at a tax booth. And what that tells us about him is that he worked for Rome, this occupying nation that had moved into Israel and was controlling everything. They were charging taxes to the people for all sorts of things. If you can come up with a thing that they could tax, they would tax it. And they would hire locals to run the taxing program. And so Matthew is one of these. He's a Jewish guy who works for an occupying nation. He is a turncoat, but what made him even worse is that these tax collectors, they wouldn't just collect the tax that Rome required. They would collect a little bit more to pad their own pockets. So they were very wealthy. They were very well off, and everybody knew exactly what they were doing. Everybody understood who they were. Everybody understood that they had decided to sell out their own people in order to line their own pockets. That's who Matthew was. I mean, if you can imagine this is like the IRS sending you a bill for what you owe and the local IRS person being like, and also 10% for me. Pretty popular, right? We'd all love that. That's who Matthew is. Matthew has decided that he's not concerned about these people. He's not concerned about doing the hard work of getting to where he wants to go. He's decided he wants to take a shortcut. He decided he wants control. Decided he wants control of the circumstances, just like all of us. The story goes like this. It's found in Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. It starts this way. It says this: as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." Simple instructions, right? This is all you got to do. Just come and follow me. Come a little closer and follow me. And Matthew got up and followed him. He got up and followed him. Which, like last week we talked about this a little bit. There was a little bit more backstory in terms of those first followers of Jesus. Matthew's story, he kind of leaves out this section where the disciples actually get to know Jesus, where they hear a little bit more of his teaching, where he engages with them. But Matthew, we don't get any of that either. Matthew just says, Jesus walks along, says, "Follow me," and he gets up and goes. And we don't know if Matthew had encountered Jesus before this. We don't know if Matthew had heard about Jesus before this. What we know is that Matthew has lived this life that he thought was full of all the things that he wanted. He had worked his own game plan to the point that he had everything he wanted. And he found he was still wanting. And so when Jesus walks along and says, "Hey, come and follow me," I think Matthew processes this pretty quickly and goes, wait, that's a completely different way of living. Because this one hasn't worked. This way of controlling everything, of doing everything my way, of trying to follow my own game plan hasn't worked. It's just left me wanting in the world. My way of controlling everything Controlling my circumstances hasn't worked. So maybe something different might make my life different. Matthew is so much like so many of us in terms of the way he closes his hands around what he wants. And when you grip everything so tight, what you find is you get so tired. You get so tired from holding everything so tightly, from trying to control everything so much. And it shouldn't surprise us that this is a struggle for all of us. This has been a struggle for all of us since the beginning of time. If we read through the scriptures, this idea of controlling our own way, of making our own game plan is there in the very beginning in the story of creation. Adam and Eve, God puts them in the garden and he says, here's just one thing I need you to do. Just don't eat from that tree over there. And they wanted control so bad, they couldn't do it. They closed their hands around the very thing that God told them not to. They thought, if I could just get this, if I could just get the fruit from that tree over there, then I'll be like God, because clearly God is holding out on me. And if I can just get a little bit more, if I can just get that thing, if I can just get to that place, if I can just have control over the outcomes, then everything will be all right. I love the way Pastor Sharon Hode Miller talks about this in her book, The Cost of Control. She says this: instead of entrusting ourselves to God's goodness, we believe our own control will serve us better. And trying to control everything will serve us so much better than following the way of Jesus. So when Matthew encounters Jesus that day on the road, and Jesus says, "Follow me," he knows. He knows he's wrestled for so long. He knows that he hasn't lived the way that he should live. He's an on-purpose sinner, right? Like there's like accidental sinners and on-purpose sinners, and Matthew is very much an on-purpose sinner. Like he knows what he's doing. He knows that he's stealing from his own people. He knows that nobody likes him. He knows that nobody's happy with him. He knows that God would be incredibly disappointed with him. And so when Jesus walks up, Jesus doesn't need to fill in the blanks. Jesus doesn't need to go, "Hey, Matthew, I don't know if you know this, but you got a problem." Matthew knows he has a problem. Look, nobody comes to church to hear what they've done wrong. We already know that. What we come to church for is to hear that there's a way out, that there's a way forward, that there's possibility. Jesus doesn't spend time talking about what Matthew's done wrong. He just says, "Come and follow me, and you'll see the way to live that offers you something more." It's not the content of your character that matters to Jesus. It's the willingness to surrender to following him that matters. Because following Jesus means I'm not following me. Because me just wants what me wants, right? I want more of me, and I want more of whatever makes me feel like more. Matthew wanted the same thing. Following Jesus means I'm not following me. It means I'm following something more. I'm following someone with greater wisdom and knowledge of the whole universe. If I'm open-handed with my life, if I'm willing to say, "Yeah, Jesus, I get you. You know it all. So I'm willing to follow your way. Be open-handed with my life." And for those of us who are like, no, I don't want to follow anybody. I want to lead. Like, we're all following someone. We're all following something. We're all being shaped and formed by someone or something. Like maybe it's a social media influencer, maybe it's somebody that we watch on the internet, maybe it's something that we've read, maybe it's the book, the last, self-help book that we picked up. We're all following someone, we're all following something. Maybe it's some other system that we've learned about. Maybe it's some diet fad or clothing trend or music style. We all follow someone or something. But Jesus invites us to follow him, to be shaped by him, to look to him. And all that Jesus asks is that we open our hands and follow him. And Matthew's got to understand when he gets up and starts following Jesus that he's giving something up. That he's giving up a sense of control of his world. He's built a whole world around worldly things. And he goes and follows Jesus. He realizes that following Jesus means he's not following him. He's putting Jesus ahead of himself, not the other way around. But if you read the rest of the story, it's so fascinating. I love this because it kind of gives us this clear picture of what really opening our hands to Jesus looks like. It says this in verse 10, as he sat at dinner in the house, that's Matthew's house. So like Jesus is like, hey, Matthew, come follow me. And then the next thing you know, they're at Matthew's house. Can you imagine the Son of God showing up and going, hey, follow me, and then like you get up and start following him. He says, hey, can we hang out at your house? Like when we have normal company over, we're like, hey, did you pick up all those things? Did you pick up all the mess so that they think that we have it all together? We want the outcome. We want everybody to think that we've got everything the way that it should be. Did you dust in that one spot that everybody sees? Did you make sure that we've got all the stuff off the floor? That all the pillows are nicely fluffed, that it looks like we don't lay on our couch. But this is Jesus coming over to his house. Like, what sort of things would he encounter if he came to your house? Probably the same sort of things he would encounter if he went to Matthew's house. Things that would make us go, oh gosh, oh, I'm so embarrassed. Oh no, Jesus, I'm sorry about Jesus, I'm sorry. And what makes this even better is that it's not just Matthew at Matthew's house, it's all of his friends are over too. They showed up for this party, this celebration. There's lots of tax collectors and sinners. So it's not just Matthew's home, it's not just the place where he lives, it's also his relationships that are laid bare before Jesus. Matthew gives him full access to his life. He gives him surrender to all of those places that we try to dust up for everybody, that we try to clean up for everybody, all those relationships that we feel like might not be the way that they need to be. And Jesus invites us to do the same thing. To open our lives to him, to follow him. Because there's a huge difference between allowing Jesus to be your Savior and really making Jesus your Lord. And the difference is as simple as following him. Being open-handed with him. Being a Christian is easy. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs Jesus everything, but it costs us nothing. But being a disciple is more difficult because it costs us control. The very thing that we all want so badly. The real irony of all of this is that the greatest sense of freedom we can have in our lives is the freedom that comes from following Jesus. Because when things get difficult, when I'm not sure what to do, I just go back to the game plan. I'm following Jesus. I know where to look. I know who I'm following. I know where to go. I know what to do because I know who I'm following. So the biggest leap that we have to take in this path of discipleship and this game plan is surrender. It's following. It's being open-handed with Jesus. The difference between a believer and a disciple is just surrender. Jesus, you can have my life. I want to follow you. I want to know your words. I want to do your work.